Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you for joining me once again today. My name is General Confusion, and this is more on the Lizardmen. So, this is actually one of a series of games I played against my friend Gunny555, who submitted that free-for-all replay. Sorry, I'm losing my words. That free-for-all replay back when. I've played several games against him. Our record is mixed. Each of us have won some and lost some. This was my first battle in a while against the Dark Elves as the Lizardmen, and I was kind of trying a different sort of build, trying out a couple of different units in an effort to sort of break through the Dark Elf line. Dark Elves are pretty good against Lizardmen, and I'm having a hard time figuring out how to deal with it. So let me kind of talk about the build and the strategies here. I brought Kroq-Gar, and rather than bringing him on his Carnosaur, I brought him on a cold one. The idea there was that he would be a slightly harder target for armor-piercing missiles to hit, and so he wouldn't go down as quickly. Excuse me. I have brought one Revivification Crystal. I've also brought one Solar Engine, so 2 Bastillodons. I brought 2 units of Kroq-Gars. They are easy targets for AP missiles, but I feel like those missiles will have other things to shoot at, and the Kroq-Gars are very, very good in the infantry fight, and Dark Elf infantry is worrying. In the front, I brought 3 units of Saurus warriors with shields, and you can see I've got them in this very spread out line. I'll talk about the strategies behind this in a bit. I have a Skink Priest of Heavens, which I really like for that armor-piercing wind blast, and on him I have also brought Curse of the Midnight Wind, and I have a Skink Chief. I've used these guys before. I really like having them just because they can kind of plink away, and in most cases there won't be anything that can really stop them, since they are speed 90 and they have that poisonous missile attack. So worst comes to worst, they can kite away from most flying units. Way over here I have 1 unit of Chameleon Skinks off on the edge of the map. I hid them in this little patch of trees, and in hindsight, we were having a conversation during this battle. In hindsight, I shouldn't have done that, really. I could have just deployed them, you know, closer over here or somewhere. But anyway, I hid them in this little patch of trees. And then in this side of the forest, I have brought 3 units of Feral Cold Ones. I've been using Feral Cold Ones a lot, trying them out in different battles. I haven't been super impressed with how they've done. If in the right situation, they can be quite useful. If they can get onto infantry or archers, they can do work. The problem is getting them there, but I'll talk about that. We'll see how that goes. The Dark Elf army I'm playing against, he has a unit of Black Ark Corsairs out here on the flank. I think he actually has 2 Black Ark Corsairs. Yeah, 2 flanking Black Ark Corsairs. He has 2 units of Dread Spears, fairly heavily chevroned, so they have high melee defense. He has 2 units of Blackguard of Nagaron, which are a very powerful anti-large unit. In general stats, they are inferior to the Phoenix Guard that the High Elves have, but they actually have a slightly higher bonus versus large. So they're a more specialized unit, basically, and they don't have that physical resistance that Phoenix Guard have. He has 2 units of Shades, which are a stalking hybrid missile and melee unit. They have pretty good melee stats. Generally, though, you take them because they have a lot of armor-piercing damage. They fire very, very quickly, and so their overall missile damage, which is almost entirely armor-piercing, is very, very high. He has 1 Reaper Bolt Thrower, led by Malekith on foot, with, let me see what he's brought on Malekith. Stand Your Ground, Gaze of Malice, Doom Bolt, Blade Wind, Word of Pain, Chill Wind. He's brought basically everything. I think he's brought almost all of Malekith's abilities, and he is guarded by a Khainite Assassin, which we haven't seen much of yet. Khainite Assassins are very much like Skaven Assassins, except their Assassin's Trophy is not as good as Trophy Heads. They have these extra abilities, Black Lotus and the Dark Venom, which is a very powerful buff. They also have an item that gives them a breath attack that he has not brought, and they have a missile attack, which is pretty powerful, albeit a lot of that damage comes from speed of fire, and it's not armor-piercing. So, strategically speaking, oh, and he has 2 units of Cold One Knights here in the woods. So, strategically speaking, the idea was I was going to harass with the Chameleon Skinks. Engaging with these widely separated infantry lines, I was hoping that that would compel the Dark Elf, or trick the Dark Elf infantry into kind of blobbing up around my Saurus warriors. Then the Kroq-Gars could charge in, and I could drop wind blasts on the engaged infantry and do some serious work. I have the solar engine over there to kind of put pressure on and snipe enemy units I don't want walking around freely, and I have the one crystal. The cold ones, the feral cold ones, were supposed to sneak through the woods if they could, and try to get onto the flanks of the infantry line where they can do a lot of damage with their armor-piercing, well, damage, their high armor-piercing damage values. See, they have 40 armor-piercing damage, which is not inconsiderable. However, well, you'll kind of see what happens with that. So, battle starts. I'm sending my skink priest forward. Chameleon skinks hanging out in the woods for now. Feral cold ones also hanging out. I'm kind of assessing the situation. Now they start to move forward. His whole army is maneuvering up towards me on the hill, while his cold one knights are moving through the woods. I've seen his shades. I think he just had this on fire at will. So his first few volleys pretty much wasted on the skink priest, but now the shades are teeing off on my skink priest. I do drop a wind blast there that gets a lot of good damage done on these shades, but in hindsight, probably would have been just as good if not better to drop it on the black guard. Now over here, my feral cold ones, this is exactly the same thing that happened in the last video I showed where I used feral cold ones. They get spotted, they run into enemy cavalry. In this case it's even worse because it's anti-large cavalry, and they just don't have the stats to deal with it. They cannot handle enemy cavalry. And of course, once they've been attacked by enemy cavalry, they're just not very useful. So my chameleon skinks are over here. They're getting some decent flanking fire, doing some decent damage to these dread spears. Really, I want to focus them on the Black Ark Corsairs, because they are shieldless. But I'll take it. My skink priest has been crystalled, so it's healing up. Over here, this fight is going on. It'll last a little while longer, but you can see the feral cold one's already just getting wrecked. Cold one knights taking some damage, but not a huge amount. The skink priest is coming in, but he's being targeted by a Doombolt, I believe. Now, Doombolt doesn't really work on the skink priest because he is a flying unit. But it was a good try. Krokgar over here is trying to maneuver to the flank. These chameleon skinks are kind of getting shot up. They are doing good damage to the Black Ark Corsairs, though, so I'll leave them in for now. The Cold One Knight, see, this one took a reasonable amount of damage, this one did not. Of course, that was 2,000 points versus less than 1,500, so kind of to be expected. My Saurus Warriors are moving in to engage with the Kroxigors in support. The Reaper Bolt Thrower is still just back there firing. Okay, so my Saurus Warriors crash into these Black Ark Corsairs. Not a great engagement, but they are going to have the Kroxigor support. The Bastillodon is firing on the Black Guard. Over here, my Skink Priest has gotten back behind the lines and is now maneuvering forward. The Kroxigors and the Saurus Warriors are doing serious damage over there. Over here, less so. I am reviving those Kroxigors, but I've got Malekith in against them, along with Dread Spears and Black Guard. Krokgar is trying to get around the side, but here come the Cold One Knights. And Krokgar is coming in to try to flank and attack Malekith, but it's not going to go well for him. Over here, the Kroxigors are just kind of getting shut down, especially as these Black Guard come in, and the Shades continue to fire. The Shades are doing a ton of damage to these Kroxigors. Look at that HP drop. It is bad. Bad, bad news. My Priest is hovering here, but he don't have enough magic for a spell right now, and now Krokgar. So here's a strong point against the Cold One. Krokgar can't pull out very effectively. You can see back here, these Cold One Knights have charged into my Bastillodon, and they're absolutely destroying the Revivification Crystal. I just don't have a way to defend it. It has a Cold-Blooded dropped on it. I wasn't really paying too much attention, unfortunately. I was trying to deal with this whole situation. Krokgar, meanwhile, he's in combat. He's doing okay because he's surrounded by Saurus. But Malekith has gotten away. The Assassin is in here fighting and debuffing my leadership. And now the Cold Ones are charging in from behind. And once the Cold Ones get around Krokgar, he's pulling in, he's trying to fight Malekith, really trying hard. Once the Cold Ones get in around him, he won't be able to escape. Kroxigors, they've gone berserk. They've done pretty well. 48 kills, and they've gotten into the Shades. Saurus Warriors, my other Kroxigors are just basically gone, and now my Skink Priest is taking a lot of missile damage. So he got off a couple of good spells, but he's not long for this world. These Saurus Warriors, still alive, have done reasonable damage, and those Black Ark Corsairs have been destroyed, but I've lost my Croxagores in the process, and now my Solar Engine Bastillodon is busting through, I think in an effort to go after the Shades. Here come the remnants of those Croxagores rampaging back in. My Skink Priest is not going to return to the battle. My crystal is gone, which means that my healing is no longer effective, and now this is where it gets bad. Croc-Gar, largely surrounded, having real trouble and not going to be able to pull out very effectively. My Revivification Crystal, of course, is routed. My Solar Engine is doing quite well, actually, but is being pursued by these spears, while the Blackguard try to finish off the Croxagores and Saurus Warriors. Chameleon Skinks, they're doing a good job. They're just sitting over here racking up damage, racking up kills. I like it. My Skink Priest has rallied, and so will hopefully be coming back in, but Croc-Gar, I tried so hard to pull him out, and he would not. Absolutely would not. No matter if I popped the swiftness of Itzel, nothing could get him out of this combat. And that's the real weakness of the Cold One. He can't escape from this kind of a situation. My Skink Chief has basically just been shooting at Malekith the whole battle. Malekith is in there. Yeah, you'll see Malekith is on less than half health, so pretty low, but the Skink Chief is just not going to make it. The last remnants of my rampaging troops here have managed to charge forward into the Shades. That's a good place for them to be. I like it, but it is too little, too late, and the Shades are actually going to clean them up in the last few seconds of the battle. My Skink Priest is wavering. I have not brought him back because I didn't have much magic left anyway, and I was busy desperately trying to get Croc-Gar out, and he couldn't. He could not escape, and now he's broken. And he dies with the pursuit of Malekith, and that spells the doom of my army. Army losses hit me, and I go down. So, the infantry strategy I feel like could have worked. They actually did quite well. Once again, Croxagores do surprisingly well even against dedicated anti-large infantry. Both of these Croxagores got over 60 kills, despite the presence of the Blackguard and the Shades shooting at them. And the Shades, if you look at those low kill numbers, you can confirm the Shades were primarily focused on the Croxagores. The things that killed me in this matchup really were... It was my leadership, frankly. My leadership and the Cold One Knights. The Shades did not help. They did a lot of damage, but even so, only 2 Shades I don't think could have stopped my infantry line, except the support of those Cold One Knights coming in. The Reaper Bolt Thrower was largely irrelevant. It can be very good in some matchups. In this matchup, it didn't do terribly well because I didn't have any large concentrations of troops for it to fire at. But the fact that Croc-Gar got trapped, and that the Cold One Knights were able to so easily clean up my Feral Cold Ones and then sweep in and take out Croc-Gar, that was the real problem. Because if you look at the infantry, Dread Spears didn't do much, Blackheart Corsairs didn't do all that much, Blackguard of Nagaron did some work, but not a huge amount. Chameleon Skinks did a lot of damage. I really like these guys. They can be dealt with, but it's hard. And in the meantime, they can just sit there and rack up damage and kills. I really like the Croxagores still. But I needed more healing support. I should have taken a second crystal instead of the Solar Engine, probably, although the Solar Engine did do a reasonable amount of damage to the Blackguard, so worth it, but I probably could have done with another crystal, and I needed some actual anti-large in this army. The Feral Cold Ones, I've been trying to make them work, trying, they don't work. They don't work well enough to pay for their cost. If you can manage to sneak them through somehow and get them onto the enemy infantry, they do pretty well. But getting them there is very, very difficult because they are very, very fragile. And any cavalry will destroy them with their low stats and their low leadership and their rampage ability. Pretty much any enemy cavalry can just rip them apart. So, in terms of how this army was built, the Feral Cold Ones were a weakness. The fact that my healing depended on a single crystal was a little bit of a weakness, and the fact that I did not protect it. I didn't have any units to spare to protect it. All my units got tied up against his front line. The Assassin, I think, did quite well, especially with debuffing Croc-Gar to keep him from getting a lot more damage done against Malekith, because Croc-Gar should have been able to fight Malekith much more effectively than he did. But he managed to hold him in place, basically, until the Cold One Knights could come in and get him. So, This matchup is a tough one for the Lizardmen, and I think victory really does depend on being able to bust through the enemy front line very quickly. However, you do need to have units available to stop this from coming in and ruining your day. So in hindsight, I should have dropped the cold ones, cut the cold ones entirely. With this many chevrons on them, I put several chevrons on them just to try them out again. They were about 550 each. Probably I could have dropped those entirely and gotten a unit of cold one spear riders and then maybe also another unit of chameleon skinks. And that would have done me in much better stead. Everything else pretty much performed, but that flanking movement that I was unable to stop took out my healing, took out my feral cold ones, and took out Krok-Gar. That was the turning point of the battle. Without that, I think I would have had a pretty good shot, because while my units were basically destroyed in the infantry fight, in the process, they took with them most of the enemy infantry. There was less than half a unit of Black Guard left, and if it hadn't been for the flanking maneuver, if I could have gotten Krok-Gar out and killed Malekith, I think I would have been in a much better shape. So in any case, thank you all so much for watching. I'm still going to be experimenting with the Lizardmen for just a day or two more before I kind of do a wrap-up. I really want to get more experience against the Dark Elves and against the Skaven, because I've had a lot against the High Elves, and I think I understand that matchup pretty well. But against the Dark Elves are very, very difficult to deal with as the Lizardmen because of all that armor-piercing, and especially all that armor-piercing ranged fire they have access to. So I'm very, very interested to try more of that. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment. Tell me what you'd like to see, or give me information about how you see these matchups progressing. And I will bring more videos your way in the near future. Have a good one, everybody.